next speaker is Stan Walters, and he is the president of Truth and Deception Incorporated. And his title is Flawed Interviews, Inconsistent Debriefings, Impaired Intelligence.
Seven seconds. That's the amount of time that we can sustain focused concentration. But also from research I've learned that same 7 seconds is a time period we make a decision in any interview, field interview to an interrogation debriefing, to decide, did that subject just lie to me? 7-second turning point. Statistics also show us that 58% of the time your assessment will be wrong. More bad news is once we walk out of that interview, if we finish debriefing that subject, debriefing that informant, the enemy combatant that's been taken off the field, in the battlefield, in the battle situation, a witness in the market where a bombing has taken place, a witness in the mall where there's been a shooting. When you walk out of the room, you will have left at least 60% of the important information on the table. You'll miss it. Now, I know you're thinking, well, not me, not my people. Tests also show us that interviewers profess to have a higher accuracy rating in spotting deception and getting information until you test them. And they perform far below their reputation and what they claim is their success rate. Now think of the impact that has on our critical cases. In the battlefield, if it's a detention facility, debriefing a subject who's witnessed an event, debriefing an informant, what does it do when you have a flawed interview, an incomplete briefing, which ultimately impairs your intelligence operation? We're all about information. But the first source of information starts with people. Now there's good news. First of all, this thing can be fixed. We can work on it. But it's going to take a little bit of time. And it starts with the virus that has perpetuated and replicating itself in our academies and our in-service training. Just like a virus in your IT system that gets in there and the thing, and my grandson got onto our laptop. We got one laptop we let him play because Logan punches every button that can be punched on the laptop. So the other day he said, "People, it won't work. I can't get into my games." So I brought the software out to clean it up. 750 different viruses and malware on this laptop. Took me 2 days to get the dang thing cleaned. We've got the same type of virus that's turned loose in our academies and our training about interview and interrogation. The first one, virus 1, is perpetuation of blatant myths about the signs of deception. I do training all over. I train military, law enforcement, I train intelligence groups, I train across the Middle East, around the world. In every class, I start asking my students, first of all, what are some of the signs of deception? What have you been taught and what have you learned? And I'll have the list. Give me 5 body language cues and 5 speech cues. For more than 3 decades, I've done this. When they call these out, 85% of the signs they'll tell me are wrong. And it's what they're being taught through academies and through officer training and in-service training. Now, I bet you right now, if I asked you to write down 5 body language cues and 5 speech cues. If you want, just think of them in your mind for just a second. And I will bet you I can pick almost every one of them you're going to write down. One you're going to write down is, if he breaks eye contact, he's lying. There's at least 35 empirical studies that show that there is no correlation between eye contact and deception. Do you know that? That's one of the most persistent myths worldwide. There's studies that show that some subjects, about 40% of our population, actually increase eye contact when they're being deceptive. They look at you more when they're lying than when they're telling the truth. That's one of the first things people write down. Or you probably got this one. Here's another of those myths that's perpetuated horrendously within law enforcement. If you ask a question look to the left, he's recalling. If you ask a question look to the right, he's constructing. If you ask a question look to the left, he's recalling, so he's telling the truth. If you ask a question look to the right, he's making it up, so anybody who breaks eye contact to the right is lying. How have you been taught that? It's garbage. There's over 100 published studies in the last 5 years alone. Shows there's absolutely no correlation at all to eye movement and deception. But it's thoroughly embedded in federal agencies, in military, and intelligence agencies. I can tell you because I talked to all of them. But they're convinced, oh no, it has to work. The last study, let me ask you this, how many would risk the lives of your personnel if you had a 10% chance of surviving on the mission? That's the correlation rate of eye movement to deception. 10%. 1 out of 9 or 1 out of 10 times you'll be right. The other 9 times you'll be wrong. You probably write down things like, if he crosses his arms, he's being deceptive. Has anybody thought of that one? If he crosses his legs, he's closing you out. He's lying. No correlation to it. If he's fidgeting and playing with clothes, if he's grooming me, if he's looking at his watch, if he sleeps, he's guilty. Have you been taught that? That's coming straight from our academy material. And some of it is just plain flat quackery. I've been following this one. I got to share this. I YouTubed this thing about 2 months ago. I got bunches of hits on this. Following this course, taught for post-certification major law enforcement agencies. You know the little lines in your lip right here? Little things right there, it's called the filtrum. This is what's taught in the course. I have the handouts, I've got the PowerPoint slides, I've got the test. If those are too far apart, that's a sign you're a child molester. Oh yeah, that's what it's taught. If you have more than 3 wrinkles in your brow, you're clinically depressed, you're likely to commit suicide. Oh, and it has a whole series on how women wear their makeup. If their eyebrows are gone too high, they're very histrionic and drama queen. If they're too low or too close together, they're very formal and they're very acid personalities. If a woman with thin lips puts lipstick on, she's very formal. She's got thick lips and puts lipstick on, she's very talkative. Oh, if a woman takes lipstick, goes off her lips onto her skin, that means she's sexually promiscuous. Right now, guys, is not the time to look for that. Later. You want to know that. And if he gestures with his right hand and switches to his left hand, that's a sign he's lying. If you have a wrinkle in your mind's eye, don't you hate it when you get a wrinkle in your mind's eye? It's like dirt on a contact lens. Where the heck is the... Suppose if you wrinkle right there, that means you're lying. If you have shifty eyes, you're going to lie, but you don't know about what? Yeah. And one of my favorites, if he's sweating, he's lying. Well, this past June, a whole lot of grooms were lying their butt off, taking their vows at the wedding altar. If that's the case, that's the type of stuff that's being taught. That class I just found out recently is being taught in contract training to our intelligence community here in the U.S. It was taught to school resource officers. It's been taught to 3 major insurance companies, that content. Texas want to know if all the training you do in interview and interrogation, were their officers doing any good? They have TCOS, which is the same variation of post, because you have post in your state. So it took, I think it was 93 officers, and they tested their skills at spotting deception. And they tried to, then they sent them 2 popular courses taught in Texas. Brought them back, tested them again to see if they improved. How many of those 93 officers got better after 2 popular courses in interview and interrogation? How many improved in spotting deception? 0. So the main problem? Those courses were the ones responsible for perpetuating the myths about deception. They didn't give them any feedback, like Roy just said. Millennials want to know feedback. How am I doing? Instructor gave them no feedback. Didn't teach them how to interview victims. Had no supporting empirical evidence for what they were teaching. It was all lecture. I've complained about that for years. Part of the work I do when I teach our classes, I have 21 days of course that I can teach. I have a level 4. I take students to prison. I have been in 27 prisons. Let me rephrase that. I have visited 27 prisons. Sorry. Words mean a lot. Dirty words, I'm thinking. Been in 27 prisons in 16 states, 1 foreign country. Done it for 20 years. Now, you want a practical exercise? That's what I do with my students for a day. And they sit down and interview inmates for 8 straight hours. That's hands-on exercise. Now we're learning. Now they're experiencing, instead of, okay, Mike, you pretend to be a pedophile. Susan, interview him as a pedophile. Discuss. That's not going to happen, is it? Now, it can't be fixed. We need to start vetting the solution to virus 1. We need to start vetting who we're relying on the academy to teach. Do they have important empirical evidence? And the argument, well, we've been around the longest, ain't going to get it. Or with one, we've always done it that way. Or we're the oldest. Or it's the cheapest course. Yeah, you want the cheapest doctor working on you? That's the same risk you're putting the people at. And you need to be thinking about some of these folks have problems. Some of their stuff has been made illegal in some countries, in Western democracies, if you're aware of that. It's in your academy right now. There's some companies that have folks that on their staff, one I'm aware of, has 5 false confessions between 2 of their instructors. 5. That's the same amount of all Chicago PDs have a problem with when they have problems. 5. And they're teaching. The next problem is virus number 2 is the philosophy we're teaching. We're teaching that it's an all or nothing type of interrogation. It's a guilt assumptive, accusatory, confrontational style. And we're going, he's got to be guilty. You have to have done it. You've got to be guilty. Well, you've seen the Animal Planet with, searching for Bigfoot. Okay. Was there ever one episode the guy goes, well, we didn't find nothing tonight? If you're going looking for a guilty subject, what are you going to find? A guilty subject. Every little lump of hair, every dropping, every scratch on a tree is Bigfoot. And your people will see nothing but guilt. We need to start teaching persuasion tactics. We need to teach not coercion, but leverage. We need to start teaching a conversational style. When the styles we're teaching right now, interviewers are talking 60% of the time in the conversation. You know that? Interviewers are asking an average of 3 questions per minute in the interview. Who's got the information? But we're running our mouth. That's not an interview-based. Or if we say asking questions, what should happen if somebody did something like this? Or it's happened before? Or what were they thinking? That's not a narrative-based interview. That's a probing question. And we're resorting to tactics in the interview room. 70% of what we're using is generating only 15% of the information. We're missing the approach if it recovers more information detail. The fix for that is to teach persuasion tactics. To understand how human beings make decisions, to use effective ethical approaches to gain confidence, to maintain compliance, and get compromise from subjects. It's not a matter of who wins and doesn't win. So the solutions are there, but until we change that culture of what we're pre-training in the academy, we're operating on impaired intelligence. And we're the problem. We're the ones getting in the way. Now, before I make my final statement, thanks to Brian and everybody for inviting me. You've got some great staff here. Very helpful folks. How many of you enjoyed the setting and the cookies and blew my diet to hell? But I had to echo what everybody said, networking. An old police sergeant I've known for years, he said he could always solve more cases over a cup of coffee or a mug of beer. He never could following the damn organizational chart. I think there was a lot to that. There was a crime spree that spread for about 3 months from Wisconsin to Iowa to Nebraska, finally into Louisiana. Jessica and 4 men were eventually identified as being involved in this crime spree. There was everything from burglary, auto theft, home invasion, including a double homicide. Jessica was interviewed numerous times by 6 detectives from 3 different jurisdictions. They ran leads for 5 months based on information that Jessica gave them. They were tracking sources, tracking individuals. Of those cases, one man gave a false confession. Another one gave a confession that he thought was best in order to keep from being charged with accomplice to murder. Third man was falsely accused and imprisoned for homicide, a double homicide he didn't commit. 5 months after this, Jessica is in jail. She sat and talked to a sheriff's deputy in the jail where she's being held. Became friends with him. Right then she talked to him and said, I want to tell you, I lied about all that stuff. Lied about everything. He said, why? 18-year-old Jessica said, they're so stupid. They didn't want to hear what I had to say. They wouldn't let me talk. So I told them what they wanted to hear. I didn't tell them what I knew.